Hey everyone! In the last video, I created a quick walkthrough of a way to get started with variants in Figma. And in this walkthrough, I used the toggle control on iOS, which allows you to switch something on or off. And this toggle control, it's pretty simple because it only has an on or an off state, and it also has either a light or a dark mode state. So all in all, there's only 4 different variants that we had to consider. But today, I wanted to share a little bit more complex example with a component that will take 10 variants to actually complete. And I want to show it in a way that allows us to actually nest components to build it. So the component that I want to focus on is called the segmented picker, and this is an option that allows a user to switch between most likely 2 different options, A or B. Really similar to the toggle. The difference is that it can have text inside, and there can also be, I believe, up to 4 or 5 options for this picker in most cases. But like I said, most of them have either 2 to 3 options, and that's what we're going to make today. Okay, so getting into Figma, I've pulled in a couple of things from a file that will make getting started a little bit easier, but I'm going to walk through exactly how I'm going to build this component and kind of what I'm thinking along the way that personally I find to be helpful. And hopefully all of these are techniques that you can take back to your own design system. So what I've done is in this option container here, I have 4 different options. Now the last one isn't visible just because it's white text on a white background. So if I go into outline mode, just by pressing Command Y, we can see that there are 4 options here. 2 for on and for light mode, and then 2 for off, which are for dark mode. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to take these 4 different options here, and I'm going to show you how I name them, which will help me just turn them into variants a little bit easier. So if I expand the group here, which has both our components and our labels inside, there are 4 options here, which are currently just frames. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make all of these individual components so that I can later turn them into a variant group. If I go to the option up top here and I choose to create multiple components, that's going to turn them all into, again, individual components. Now I've named these this way, which is not something you have to do from the start. I personally just find it a little bit easier. So it won't make sense at first, but if we see here, we have option/true/false, option/true/true. It's a little confusing, but the reason that I'm doing this is I know that I want to have both a light and a dark mode option, as well as a selected or not selected option. So there's 2 binary states that I'm kind of accounting for here. So with these selected, the first thing that I'll do is I'll head over to the right-hand side and choose to combine these different components as variants. We have the option over here to rename both the property 1 and the property 2 values, which are both set to true or false. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to name my very first one. This one is going to be dark mode. So it's going to be the option that allows us to switch between light and dark mode. So I'll just double click and we can rename this to dark mode. And then the second property here, let's go ahead and rename that to be selected. So again, if false is selected for dark mode, it's in light mode. If true is selected for dark mode, it's in dark mode. And the same goes for the selected state. So next, I just want to double check that I've actually named these correctly with how the properties align. What I'll do is I'll select this one here and this one here. And because they're both the selected state, we just want to make sure that's set to true. And then this one here and this one here, we just want to make sure that selected state is set to false. So those look good. The other thing that I want to do is I want to select both of these and just make sure that the dark mode aligns. So in this case, dark mode is true. And then in this case, for the top 2, dark mode is false. So everything looks pretty good. We have 4 different components now that we're going to use as a nested component inside of a new variant group. So all we have to do is I want to take both a selected option and a not selected option and combine those into a new variant component. What I'll do is I'll grab our on option here and we'll just drag this outside of the group, just holding option. And then we'll do the same thing for our off option here, drag this outside of the group. And now we have both an on and an off option. So it looks a little messy right now, but what we're going to do is just zoom in here and I'll double click on this, and let's go ahead and create a new component here. So I'll do option command K to combine those both into a new component. And then I also want to apply auto layout to this just to make it easier to work with. With it selected, we'll go over here. We can choose to apply auto layout. I know for this one, I want the spacing to be 0 and I want to give a padding of 1, which I think will kind of help everything. So applying 1 here, if I click the alignment and padding option, that's just going to set everything to have a 1 pixel padding. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to zoom out, and I actually copied the background over here that I want to apply for my component. So this is the background that we're going to use for that component. So I'll choose option command C just to copy the style. And then if we go back to our new component that we just made, I'll do Option Command V to actually paste that style. And if we zoom in, I think things are looking okay. It actually does look a little bit tight, so maybe on this one we want to do 2 pixels. That looks a lot better. Okay, so what I like to do as I'm kind of creating these components and testing them is as soon as I've created a component, I'll actually select it, hold Option, drag it off the frame that I'm working with, and then I'll just try to mess around with it. So what breaks and what doesn't break as I kind of resize it or stretch it. So it looks like these options here aren't stretching with the container, and they're also not stretching with the height change as well. So what I want to do is I want to just double click inside here, and we can select both of our options. They're currently set to fixed, so I want to change that to be fill. And they're also currently set to a fixed height, so I also want to change that to be a fill container. And now you can see in that instance, it's really helpful because now I can resize it and it looks like those work as we were expecting them to. Just a quick tip, as you're building components, drag an instance off, see how it's working, play around with it, stretch it, shrink it, and then as you make adjustments to the main component, it's just gonna help you give you that feedback loop a little bit easier. So we have our first component made, and something that I do that helps me when I'm making really large variant groups is I'll just type out all of the different states that I need. That way I can make sure that I'm actually creating all of the right ones as I'm going. So in this case, it looks like our first one I miscreated. So the right one should have been selected and the left option here should have not been selected. But because we're basing all of these off of a nested option, which is a variant group up here, it's really easy to change. So check this out. As I go in here and I select the option on the left, we want this to be not selected. So I will just turn that off. And then for this option here, we do want it to be selected. So I'll just turn that on. That's just one component and we need to make several more. And we also need to create a new variant group from all of these components. So the easiest thing to do is going to be to duplicate this. And now that we have that duplicated, we can go ahead and detach this component. So Option Command B, and then create a new component from it, Option Command K. And just like we did in the very beginning, we can select both of these new main components and choose to combine them as variants. So we have our new component now. It's called Component 3 with 2 components inside, and both of these are different variants that we can switch between. Before I go any further, I kind of want to rename everything and get the properties right, just so it's a little bit easier to go forward. So what I'm gonna do is let's go ahead and rename this to be Segmented Picker. And for our first option here, well, first we actually need to apply some properties. So for the first property here, we can have this be, let's call this the number of options. So we can do options here, and let's go ahead and set this to be 2 options to start with. So this just means how many controls are there or how many options are there for the user to choose from. In this case, there are only 2. So to get rid of this one here, we just need to select both of these and make sure that 2 options is selected. And now if we go back, that option's gone. I know I'm saying option a lot, but hopefully you're sticking with me. All right, so in this one, we want our left one to be selected. So all we have to do is select this, choose selected, choose the one on the right, and then choose for it to not be selected. Now we need to do one more thing. So we need to apply both a light mode property as well as the selected option in the variant group. So I want to go to the right-hand side and choose to create a new property. And on this one, we can do, let's go ahead and call it, not dark light, let's go ahead and call it dark mode. And because we're creating all light options now, we can go ahead and just say that this is false. All right, so we have dark mode taken care of. When we go ahead and create our dark mode component, we can switch that option to be true. Now, we also need to select which one is going to be the selected option. So what we'll do is let's go ahead and choose to create one more property, which is a selected property. And on this one here, we can say that the right one is selected. So we'll go ahead and rename this to be right selected. And then on this one here, we'll go ahead and say left is selected. So now that we have all of those, what's great is we can click on the outer variant group and we no longer see that warning message from Figma. And that just lets us know that all of our options inside are taken care of, or they have the right properties applied. There's no conflicting properties, which is great. If we go back to that one that we brought out in the very beginning, we can actually start to test this one now. So the first thing I'll do is I want to right click and just choose to reset all of the properties that were associated with it, or the ones that we changed. And on the right-hand side, I now have the ability to kind of toggle through the different options that we created. For example, we only have the ability to switch between 2 options right now, but we do have the ability to switch between which one of those options is selected because we created those 2 variants in the group. So I'll go ahead and choose left selected, that updates. I can also go ahead and choose right selected, and now this one updates. Okay, so we're getting into a much better spot. We have our component created, we have a couple of variants inside, and now we just need to account for all of the other options that we could have. Because we have auto layout set up, it's going to be really easy to create the ones with 3 options. So if I take this one here and duplicate it one more time, I'm going to go ahead and set this one here to be 3 options, and then we'll keep it as left selected. The thing that I want to do though is I just want to duplicate our option that is switched off. So duplicate it, and because again everything inside was set to fill the container, as soon as we create another option, everything just kind of resizes to fit it. So we have our new option here, the left one is selected, which is perfect. If I duplicate this one more time, maybe you're getting the hang of it now, but we can just go ahead and select this one, turn it on, select this one, turn it off, and then let's go ahead and rename this to be, instead of left selected, we'll do center selected. And then one more time for the right one. So duplicate, select, perfect. So now we have a component that has both 2 options available with both the left and the right one selectable, and then one with 3 options available with both the center, the left, and the right. So if we test that out again over here, and again, you can kind of pick up on it, but I just like to test an instance as I'm building. It just makes it so much easier to avoid any mistakes down the road or to kind of help guide you as you go. So we can take this component here and let's change this to be 3 options now. And then we can also change maybe left, we can go right, and we can go center. So that all works as expected, but there's one thing that I want to point out, which is it's a little weird for us to go left, right, and center. I almost would have preferred that to be left, center, and then right. So to change that, all we have to do is click on the outer variant group itself. We can just reorder the properties inside. So in this case, I drug center to be the second option here. Now if I go back here on our segmented control, we can see that we have left, center, and then right, which just makes a little bit more sense. Also, if you're wondering, if we have an option that has just 2 options available, and maybe the designer selects the one to be selected as the center one, it will automatically just convert the one that makes the most sense, or the one that has all of those properties that are matching applied. Okay, so real fast, I'm gonna go ahead and create the dark mode versions super easily, because what we can do is we can take all of our options here, we can hit Command D, and going to go ahead and just reorder these. And now what we can do is we can actually just hit enter to expand the list here. Let's actually first type in true for our dark mode property. And then over here, we'll select our new ones, hit enter, and we can actually just turn dark mode on just like that, because again, we've built all of this with nested components inside. And in that nested component, we gave the option for light or dark mode from the very beginning. The thing that's missing though is we just need to change that background color. So let me zoom out, and just like before, I will select our dark mode, Option Command C to copy it. And then for all of our new ones here, let's go ahead and select all of these, and then Option Command V. And now I've got that new background applied. Okay, so with all of our options now created, let's go ahead and test it just to make sure that everything works. So again, we have our option up here at the top left. We can right click, choose to reset all of the overrides if we've made any. In this case, we've just been adjusting the different variants, so there's no need to reset it. But if we select it, we can now go through the different options. So we have 2 options here. We can switch between light and dark mode, and we can also switch between the left one and the right one as selected. If we bump this up to 3, we now have our 3 options. We can switch between light and dark mode, and we can also choose each of our 3 options here. And then just to make sure, let's walk through this. Dark mode works as expected. So we just created 10 different variants really easily through the ability of duplicating components, applying the dark mode that we created from that nested instance up here at the very top, and also just choosing to write out what variant should we have from the very beginning. Again, this helps me so much just because when you're in it, you kind of, it's just tough to keep track. Like there's so many to create, there's a lot that's going on in Figma. And as you go through, if you can kind of reference maybe a list that you made on the canvas of, do I have this one? Is it included? It just makes the whole process a little bit easier to keep track of. So, all right, I will attach this file in the description if it's helpful to see. I know that was a lot, but hopefully all of that made sense. I know, speaking from experience, variant groups can be a little bit confusing to work with, but I really do think as you experience them more and as you practice more with them, they begin to make so much more sense. It's really hard to go backwards with creating components, at least in my experience, once you've started to create variant groups. So let me know if this was helpful, and if there's anything else you'd like to see, I'm totally open. I really enjoy creating this content and helping people feel less intimidation or less hurdles when it comes to actually working with the design tool that is Figma and design in general. So thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next one soon.